Hi everyone, welcome to the Kit Breakdown, and today I've got three very special guests with me. Well, two anyway. You used to see in Craig, but in Peter Hudson and Clancy Boyer, we have the triumvirate of Nike brain power that brought Total 90 to the world just over 20 years ago. Everyone's excited to see Nike bringing that back to the market now. And so we thought the opportunity was right to have a conversation with these guys, find out how it all came about and what they've been up to since. Everybody, thanks for joining us. I will start by introducing Clancy. Do you want to say hello to everybody and tell us what your role was once upon a time and what you're up to now?
Yeah, definitely once upon a time. I mean, we're talking the dark ages. I can't believe how long it's been now. Well, I was working in soccer equipment at the time. I actually think that this was the project where really got to know Peter and Craig, really started working closely with. I mean, we did some not Olympics, World Cup stuff, but I think I kind of stepped into that as it was already being kind of worked on and designed. And so I was kind of, my way through with World Cup. But then the total 90s when we, all three of us, like really intentionally worked together. And I was the graphic designer. So I came in, um, and I was even new to the world of soccer. Being an American, I grew up playing the typical American sports, track and field, American football. Not much of a baseball player, not much of a basketball player, certainly not soccer. So I think I approached everything a little bit differently and was kind of eating it up because I knew nothing about it. And so that's typically how I approach my work. Anyways, so it just everything was fun, and as these two will tell you as we get into our story, we had a lot of fun doing it as well.
Totally. Peter, introduce yourself to
Yeah,
the
my
crew.
name's Peter Hudson. I was the creative director of Nike Football back in the day when Nike Football was a brand new category to the brand, and they were bringing in a lot of talent. So yeah, I was set up as a creative director working with a bunch of designers across all the different disciplines, and we were charged to create something incredibly special. I think the guys will attest to that. We basically had a blank sheet of paper. We had the best teams, the best clubs in the world who needed incredible equipment. We had Adidas as the main competitor. They were number one. We were, well, non-existent in football. And basically, the dreams that we came up with collectively, nobody really argued with them. They put massive effort into making them come to life. And it was an incredible time. I mean, I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. And I think the time in Nike Football back in the, what was it, guys? Like 2000 to 2007, 8, that kind of period.
Yeah,
it never happened before, and it'll never happen again. We were there at the right time.
Bit of a revolution. Craig, I know that our viewers will already know you for being my chirpy Geordie sidekick, but tell us a little bit about what you were up to at Nike as well.
Yeah, well, I think Peter summed it up really quite nicely, as did Clancy as well. I think we all kind of joined a company that, by all accounts, was one of the biggest brands on the planet, certainly in apparel, footwear and accessories, the sports industry and stuff. But it felt like a bit of a startup business within football. Now, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it kind of did, because we were absolutely nowhere as far as football was concerned, or soccer if you come from the US. But, we, as Peter called out, we had the opportunity to go in and pretty much, do what we wanted. And I was certainly coming off the back of, as we all were, a really successful World Cup, and the fact that we just won the World Cup with Brazil, first ever Brazilian team to win the World Cup in a Nike kit. And I think it was Nike's first ever World Cup. So those history books started getting wrote, if you like. So yeah, it was a really special time. But I think at that time, we'd start to see the momentum happening. And I think, my experience of going through Total 90 was somewhat a little bit different to some of the other guys. And as much as I faced a lot of challenges trying to get that 9-0 onto product, I mean, just sleepless nights. It looked amazing on the boot. It looked amazing on the ball. And when I was trying to put it on apparel, You know, the roadblocks that I got was just unbelievable, and we really had to kick ass to get that stuff through. So, yeah, but I mean, God, as far as the time was concerned, amazing.
I don't know why you would have got pushback because, do you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting how you say that now because I wasn't really aware of that, right? So it was a done deal on the footwear, it was a done deal on the equipment, and everybody loved it. And then, you know, well, what you're not gonna put it on the apparel? It's like, you know, that was a silly question. I mean, obviously you wanted it, and you did a great job of application, but it just shows you how different category can still be catching up with their confidence, right? Because I think in the Total 90, the mercurial that I'd done prior was just that rewrote the rule book, right? So there was like, I think footwear maybe had a different level of kind of confidence in themselves. Maybe I think you're right in that probably the kits were a little bit more competitive still than football based upon the sponsorship situation and stuff like that. But it's funny, I've not heard that it was as hard as you say it was, Craig.
The other thing that played into that is proximity. I mean, like, you know, I was across the hall from Peter and you were across the pond. I mean, like, so that made a massive difference. I always just thought, like, whenever we were working together, just to like make sure that communication, like, you know, Peter and we saw each other every day. And I just think that made a difference.
That's a great
as well.
point, Clancy.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really fair point. And I think, you know, one of the things that people obviously don't realize, and behind the curtain of these big brands that you work for, there's a lot of politics that goes on internally. And not a lot of people talk about it because they're frightened in case, you know, they say the wrong thing or they're not politically correct. But, you know, I'd come over to the US to meet up with you guys. And, you know, I think we'd buggered off the burn at that point. We're talking about the 9-0 and how it applies across all the different categories and stuff. And I was so energized in going back. And as I went back, you know, I met with the boys club, as I used to like to call it back in those days. And I mean, it was just hit with a brick wall, you know, and so much so that I was losing sleep overnight about it. And it was a really stressful time because I knew what we needed to do. And my intention was to try and get all the numbers at the time in the 9-0, which would have made in the circle, which would have made total sense, or at least get it on the outside of the product. And I think eventually what we ended up getting Fionn, who was the designer that was, we managed to get a circle on the back of the jersey, and we got the 9-0 put in the back neck as a little pad print on the insides of the products. But other than that, we weren't really successful with it on field. And then I think as we got closer to the event, as you say, we got a bit more confidence. You know, we started putting it on more product, and the training product became synonymous for it. And that was the real lever that became really popular with Joe Blow.
So how did you get to that point now? What was the start point? You know, I mean, Peter, you mentioned that there was pretty much a blank piece of paper with regards to Nike football. You know, I remember at the time working for rival brands that the conversation coming out of Nike was right the future, you know, and it was very much about not necessarily having that history to lean into within football and needing to come up with something new. And that was very much what was happening. So on the back of obviously 2002 and the first Vapor and the 2-layer shirt and whatever else had been happening, what was the next step then in terms of that briefing for Total? Because it wouldn't have been briefed in as Total 90. Obviously, it would have been a click above that, and that's where you guys get to work to kind of create the story.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to go back a little bit. So I'll just quickly go back a little bit. So Nike had done football in like the 70s and the 80s, and they'd gone to Ireland and they'd basically built football boots in Ireland, and they basically copied off. I think they copied off the Copa, literally copied off of it. And as Craig says, you know, I mean, I love Nike, but let's just be real about it. They'd copied off I think it was a Copa back in the day, and it bombed. And then they basically just kind of didn't bother with football for many, many years thereafter. And then in the like 1998 kind of 99 kind of no, earlier than that, 95 kind of period, the CEO at the time basically said, look, if we're going to be a global brand and not a North American running brand, we need to be in football, right? And they were literally back then, people forget, like back then they were number 3. It was Adidas, Reebok, then Nike. They were big, but they weren't like who they are now. And they were basically a running brand. So the CEO said, look, to be global, you got to compete and win in football. So they went out and, they signed the best teams, the best players, the best clubs. They literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars as a strategic spend to leverage to get into football to kind of win the prize. And then they kind of pulled together a team, mainly of Europeans, but still some senior leaders from the US, and said, like, go make some amazing products. I mean, that was literally it. We had nothing. We had some boots that had kind of caught the imagination. First Mercurial back in the day, GX, and a couple of others, but it wasn't cohesive. They were one-offs. So we came in, Clancy and Craig and I and a bunch of others came in with basically a huge amount of pressure to deliver something to the best players, teams, clubs in the world who want the best products in the world and have come off of brands who gave them really good products. And they just said, like, make it happen. So we were kind of had this incredibly kind of powerful, or you might say sometimes toxic combination of pressure and imagination to create something. So when I did the Mercurial footwear, that was basically me just kind of dreaming about creating something. And I'm not football obsessed like you guys are. Like, I love the sport, I respect it, but I approached it as a creative and a designer and an engineer, not with any hang up of what it was and what it, I was thinking about what it could be, not what it was. So we came into that as a team. And then by the time Total 90 was a marketing concept. So we had Mercurial, which was speed, Total 90, which was for the players who were basically dominating the full 90 minutes of the game, running, playing, making play, just, the fittest players on the pitch, pushing hard. And then you have the classic players in Tiempo who kind of, move around, make plays, or kind of catch it when it's going. And that was the classic boot. So we had the silo of Total 90. And I was like, well, that's the silo. That's what we're going to tell the story. Why not kind of have that in the product? And I was like, and that led me to, well, why don't we have it on the product? And then the 90 mark came from my other passion aside from design and sport is motorsport and cars. So the 90 came from, if you look at classic race cars from the 70s, like the Porsches and Astons, and Astons is earlier. If you look at those cars where they have the classic circle signs on the side of the cars in the 50s, 60s, that's literally where it came from. I literally, people are grown and, maybe that's fine, but I literally just took that 90 from the concept of the game and the silo of the product, so mixed it with motorsport and put it on the side of the boot and said, let's do that. And, I showed it to Tinker Hatfield. So Tinker Hatfield, who everybody knows, the god of the industry, I showed it to him and he loved it. So then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it now. I'm going to see who goes with it. And then, as Craig said, who doesn't go with it. And it was a mixed bag, to be fair. And now in kind of 20 years on, nobody will say what Craig said. Everybody like, oh, it was amazing. We were so excited about it. Nobody remembers the pain, the sleepless nights, the grief. And there is a lot of that. There is nothing that we did came, I said it came easy. In some ways it came easy, and in some ways it was incredibly hard.
Whoa. Hold on a minute. We just want to interrupt these proceedings. We would like to talk to you about the Spark Design Academy, which, as most of you may know, we offer courses from 2 proven industry experts about how to get a leg up in the design industry. Our courses focus on football kit design, but it offers so much more than that. We tell you how to design football kits, how to present those football kits, what we'd expect to see with your research, and so on and so forth. We really do give you the inside track that we would be looking for as creative directors. So sign up to the course today. There's a special offer for this month only. You'll get it for 75 quid. Yes, 75 quid. So sign up today. Don't be shy, like, subscribe, and get over to Spark Design Academy.
We met here. I live in Bend, Oregon. Yeah. We met in Bend, Oregon, the 3 of us. Remember, guys? And we went for a walk and we got lost in the wilderness here. And all we did was we got lost because we were talking about football for like 4 hours. And then we came back and we were together. Like our heads were like, we were all together on this. So it was Clancy, Craig and I who made it happen like creatively, because as Craig said, and like we weren't gonna not make this happen. I don't know quite why that happened, but we just had this belief and we had this, the three of us wanted it to happen. So it happened, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally.
I'm gonna go back a little bit, because like one of the most humiliating parts in my career was just prior to that. So 04, the target of 04 with Total 90 was massive. As you said, Peter, we come off, and Craig, you both mentioned, we come off the win of World Cup. And so the pressure was on. And from the ball perspective, you know, we had that mercurial vapor design. And so, and at this point, we were all still pretty fragmented. I mean, footwear did what footwear did, equipment did what equipment did, and apparel did what apparel did. And it wasn't until the whole Total 90 thing for 04 that we came together. But prior to that, so the embarrassing thing was like, so I had to work with that mercurial graphic, and I had to work within that framework and create something that, you know, that was going to dazzle the world, right? And it was like so difficult because it was a very rigid framework that had to be worked within. And it's kind of like a clover leaf, if you guys remember, a very geometric, modern looking clover leaf. So I took myself and another designer, and we kind of went on this boondoggle. We went to Portugal and Spain, and we're like just kind of like checking out like some of the venues of like where the game was going to be played, trying to find inspiration. And so we came up with this design. And so, Peter, I don't know if you remember this or not. So I don't know if you were part of it or not, Craig, but there was a football meeting in Lisbon, and we presented the ball in Lisbon, and I had this design on it. We were trying to go with this chrome casing and this graphic, and so far the developers had not gotten the chrome right. The inks weren't sitting on it right, but we had to present it. We created like this space helmet, like reveal for it. So like this whole thing was built up, and I did not want to present it because nothing came together right. I mean, it looked like crap. And so, and I remember Ian Walton, who was our PLM, product line manager, is he and he's like, no, dude, we have to do this. And I'm like, oh, this is going to just fall flat. And sure enough, like we did this reveal, opened up this case, and like, it was just quiet around the table. I mean, everyone from everywhere came to Lisbon for this meeting, and this was our stupid reveal. And I'm like, what the hell? And so from Lisbon on, we get back to Beaverton, and like just the humiliation of that, like just like we totally bombed, and like where in the hell do we go from here? Well, that is then when, Peter, you kind of came and said, hey, here's what we've done. You had the Total 90, you had figured out the whole visual language. I don't remember if it was Tom Minami or whoever it was that was like working on the boots at the time, but like had these designs laid out, like the whole color palette. And I'm like, okay, I have to like figure this out. And from the ball side of things, Richard Avis, who was like our ball engineer, he had this new casing. We were working with a specific type ball pattern, how it was stitched together, all that kind of stuff. And it was supposed to fly better, you know, increase the sport. Total 90, everything is about performance, the total 90 minutes, and bringing that high level of performance to the athlete. So it's like, how do we capture it on the ball? So taking that badge that Peter was talking about, that Circle 90, essentially I took two of them, put one on each side of the ball. And I also just happened to be reading a design engineering book at the same time. It's right in front of me. I can see it from here. And they were talking about like, because I put this strip on the ball, and when you put that strip on the ball and you spin it, it actually helps you to see it better. And so I incorporated that strip, essentially two Circle 90s on each side, threw in the color, and that was it. So again, like this idea that in some ways it was simple, but in other ways it was also a nightmare to get there because of the politics of the business, the goals that needed to be achieved, the way we typically achieve them, 3 different groups in 2 different parts of the world. bringing all that together. I mean, in some ways we're kind of lucky, but in the other, it's like, I would say with Peter's leadership, had created that visual language, was really good at sharing it and, pulling us all in. And then we just kind of got together and made it happen. This is the first time, actually, Craig, I've heard your story about it. You did a good job, man. Like, not sure, because I already knew how apparel was political. I remember that whole like Nike apparel badge all over in Europe that was being pushed really hard, and like just like, and that to me is like, why aren't we just like Nike football, Nike soccer? And it didn't happen until the Total 90 push.
It seemed, I was going to say from the, I was working over in Hudson at Puma at the time, and it definitely felt like it was a step change for the whole industry. To, the three silos became really apparent. I think that was the first time externally, obviously there was industry chatter as to what Nike were up to, but it was the first time it was really externally clear as to what those silos were. Everybody rushed to, to get behind it and basically ape it. That became the three ways of doing it. And I think to a certain extent the Vapor ball, but then the T90 ball in particular, changed the perspective on the other aspects of what was on field for football. It had always been about shirts and boots, and that was about it. And suddenly the design emphasis on balls, on goalkeeper gloves, on guards, on socks, everything just got massively amplified. Even with the simple number in a circle on the front of the shirt, then typefaces were taken really seriously. There'd been a fairly standard set of typefaces on shirts, and then that became like, here's a chance to do something different. And you guys kind of delivered all of it in one package. I mean, Clancy, you touched on there that on the face of it, it was really simple, but as a creative, it's really hard to get to a simple answer sometimes, especially if the expectation is that, it's going to be, the reveal's going to be in an astronaut's helmet. That if that's the expectation, to then be like, ta-da, it's a circle, can be, kind of difficult. So, I mean, in terms of the internal pushback initially and acceptance, because there's usually a bit of both. How was that for all of you? Peter, you've mentioned it was Tinker Hatfield got on board with it right away, but was there anybody that was like, what? You want to put a number on the side of a shoe?
I mean, that's your first, as a designer, right? You do most of your creative is happening in your head, whether you realize it or not, right? And then it becomes manifest. For the old schools, it becomes manifested through some sketches. Now it's a different world, but it's the same thing. And then there's the one moment where you show what's come out of your head, right? You show, and it might be a rendering of the product. It might be an inspiration that got you there. It can be many things, but there's a before and an after moment where you have kept it to yourself and where you've shared it with somebody. And those moments, sometimes you do it in front of a crowd, sometimes you do it in front of one person or whatever. And these guys, you guys all know that because you're all designers. That moment is it happens on every single project that you do, and it happens hundreds of times. So it's a really special moment, right? Because it can be validating, or it can be not, or your response can be, I don't get it, or your response can be, I hate it. There's so many responses, and you have to just kind of somehow, and I don't know how you even speak to it necessarily, but you have that moment where you share it and different people respond. The first response, if somebody loves it, that doesn't mean they're going to love it at the end. If somebody hates it, it doesn't mean they're going to hate it at the end. So it's a very complicated, mercurial, moving thing. And at the center of it is your belief and confidence as a creative to bring people along. Those who don't like it, get them to like it. Those who do like it, get them to keep liking it, because they can change their mind. The person next to them doesn't like it. All of a sudden, they're a sheep. They don't like it. This is the bullshit that you have to deal with as a creative, and that's the toll that it takes on you as a creative. Creativity, you feel right, is actually relatively easy. It's the people side of it, getting it through a machine, getting it through the system, getting it so it's not fucked up and diluted. That's the product that's most successful tends to be that product. And that's why you need to have partners in crime like these guys. To me, I mean, I had a creative vision for everything. These guys will tell you every square millimeter on a product to me is considered, and it looks that way because it's been decided to be looking that way.
Are you enjoying the videos, guys? I hope so, but if you want to be a designer just like Peter Hudson and design iconic product just like he has done, then get yourself over to Spark Design Academy, where Rob and Craig will teach you just the processes that you need to be able to do what Peter's done and follow in his illustrious career. Sign up today for a limited period only. You'll get it for just £75. That's a night out maybe for most people. Get yourself over, sign up today, just do it. You've got nothing to lose.
So as you said, Rob, like, you know, a number on a kit, the stitching on a kit, you know, the collar, whether it's this design, that material, or whatever, everything is considered. And I think in football, for the most part, much of it had been considered in the past, but it had been considered through design and through, engineering and costing, not through design, beauty, style, performance, all of that. So we basically, we cracked that case open. And then I think you're right, Rob, that then it gave permission or inspiration for everybody to kind of do what we were doing, which means your leadership position then only lasted for so long, because then everybody else is like, shit, we can do more with this. We can think about that part of it. We kind of gave permission to that, right? These guys, Clancy and Clancy on the ball would consider every little element. So did Craig. They did it not just because I wanted it to be that way, but they did it because that's how they worked as well.
What was interesting, and you know, coming off the back of the World Cup, I think we'd realise that we'd probably hit the ball against the post to some extent, because we had such an iconic boot, which happens to be kind of behind us, you know, which is the silver
Chrome material,
or the chrome boot that we did, which was amazing. And then we had the ball, which obviously Clancy's told that story about, which is interesting. But then the apparel was all about cool motion, and, you know, those kind of worlds didn't connect as such. You know, so I think coming off the back of that, we all realised that the opportunity is uniting everybody. And you're right, Rob, to a large extent, that has paved the way for so many businesses to actually conduct their approach to design now. So like 360 concepts.
I mean, as industry veterans now, would you say that that's still something that you see across, particularly football, but across sport in general? If I think back to that era, I guess from 2002 until about 2012, I guess, if I take that 10 years as a snapshot, on a kits before that, boots before that, equipment before that had always been quite, not necessarily formulaic. There'd been diversity in terms of graphics and things like that, but there was very little that broke the mold. You know, football shirts were massive. Boots tended to be kangaroo leather, was as good as it could get. The panel configuration on a ball was fairly standardized. And then during that period, it felt like there was a lot happening. Everyone was trying to do something different. From your perspective, do you think that's still the case, or do you think there's too much reliance now on the history that was created back then?
That's, to be honest, that's what I was going to go on to say. I think while we did that, and we continue to do that for some time, I think where the industry's got to now, you don't see those connections as strongly as we did, because the other component that we're missing out here to a large extent is how that circle then got interpreted into all the ad campaigns and the Ole ad. You know, so it went through absolutely fucking everything, man, everything. You know, it wasn't just on the side of a boot. It was fucking on beer mats. It was everywhere. It was, balls were being smashed into the sides of buildings and all sorts of stuff. It was just the whole 9 yards. You don't see that as much now. And I genuinely believe a lot of that, certainly in my experience, is because of the amount of stuff that we're churning out. Like, I'm sure if we rewound the clock and, you know, the three of us were hired again to do that whole thing again, there's no way we'd get as much time as we did to deliver that stuff back in those days. You know, when I look at the kind of how often football kits are being produced and put into the market, how often we see new football boots and new colorways, and it doesn't seem to be as connected as it once was. And I might be doing a disservice. I'd love to hear what the other guys think. But for me, I just think that those golden moments where you can go into in my case, a football kit, and literally start from scratch. The fabric, the color, the back necks, everything was considered, literally every component on that football kit. Whereas if I look at what, well, Nike does now, I mean, we've had the same fabrications for the last God knows how many years, you know? So just feels like that whole innovation side of things, while it's happening, certainly Nike, I think, are massively just looking backwards
You
all the
mentioned
time
there
now.
as well, though, the life cycle of products. I mean, Peter, Clancy, when you were putting together the colours for the boots and the equipment, if I think now there's like multiple new colour drops of a particular model of boot every few weeks, and they're on the field, and some players are getting one colourway and some are getting others. Whereas, if memory serves me correctly, when T90 was first dropped, it was basically red and chrome, and there was black and chrome, and there was royal blue and chrome followed it up. But there was such purity of colour, and it seemed to be around for quite a while as well, so it had chance to become iconic. Do you think that played a role?
You want to go, Clancy? I'll go after you.
Sure. Yeah. Like, again, I would just go back to like Peter's inspiration, the motorsport. And in itself, there was just such a purity in just borrowing from that, and then it was that in and of itself was so inspirational. And then because of the simplicity of that visual language, it applied itself in a certain way. But it's just like everything else in this conversation. Like there's always these hidden complexities that lead to results. And I think the fact that you had the three of us, and then behind the three of us, we had engineers, we had materials people, we had colorists, we had other things that, people that you don't get to hear from or see from, that played into this as well. And it was the culmination, I think, that created a unique moment in time that set a precedence for the industry. So I don't know. I look at today, I walk through sporting goods stores and I'm just like, what the heck is going on? Because it seems like it is all over the place, and the pressures today, especially from consumers with influencers and stuff like that, and athletes having to have their own thing. It's just, I don't know. It's so segregated, for lack of a better word, versus like having this. And again, we were already separated, so we were making an effort to come together. And so that effort to become unified, I think, worked itself out, manifested itself in this way in which you saw everything. And Craig made a great mention about like the marketing that was behind this. It almost, in some ways, seemed to exceeded what we did for the World Cup. And just the efforts, the marketing was amazing. It was beautiful. The Olay campaign, the TV that matched it. I still have magazines from back then, Dazed and Confused, where they took these massive like nylon ball. They were meant to look like the Total 90 ball, but they were just really simplified. But it had an impact, a visual impact like I had never seen before. And it's just like, so I think it was, in many ways, to answer your question, Rob, like there was that moment in time. Obviously, it had an impact on the industry, and that there was multiple years of benefit from that. But I think that what we're seeing today, it's like, I feel like it's I mentioned Dazed and Confused magazine. It's a bit dazed and confused out there.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it was close to being a unique situation, right? So you had a brand with the belief that it wanted to own football and do it in its own way. And when you say doing it in its own way from Nike, that means you're going to do whatever it takes financially. You're going to do whatever it takes creatively. You're going to take risks that's never been done. So you had that moment that back then that nobody's ever going to do that again. So in that way, we were kind of pulled into a once in a lifetime industry sport category moment. That's never going to happen again. But we can see the ripples are still here today, where basically not everything, maybe almost everything that you see in the market is a derivative and a dilution of what we did 20 plus years ago. Nobody's really broke the mold. And actually, nobody's done anything like if you look at the Total 90 in training, the Total 90 in the streetwear, footwear space. I mean, we sold a hell of a lot of Total 90 boots. And we had Total 90 boots going all the way down through the range, through to kids and like little booties. I mean, seriously, like massive millions and millions and millions and millions of pairs. And then the street products where, futsal and everything, that had Total 90. So it was absolutely pervasive. But that's what Nike wanted to do. They wanted to dominate, and they wanted to kind of just flood the market. with something special. And I don't think anybody's kind of got that vision anymore. And B, even if he did have that vision, it's a different world. It's a different world. So I don't think it's repeatable, but I do think if he had the same vision that Nike and we had 20 years ago and you played it out today, you would be able to move the market differently than is happening now, because basically nothing is happening now. There's nothing happening.
Yeah.
Everybody's a derivative of each other. So, I think, but it costs money to do what Nike did, and vision and passion. So, will it happen? Maybe, but it's not very likely.
I think what's interesting on that though, Peter, is you're absolutely right. The likes of your Nikes and your Adidas and your Pumas to some extent will maybe struggle to do that. But I do believe that there's other brands that are going to do it, and they will take market share in a big way. If I look at what On have done in running, they've completely taken a big, massive bite out of Nike's arse because they took their eye off the ball. So I think there are pioneers that are prepared to break the mold again. I just think with a lot of these big, huge corporate animals, they get to a point where they just stop putting their faith and trust in the design process. And when we talk about design-led companies, it doesn't mean to say that designers are telling everybody what to do, but it means to go back to the principle of design, to creatively get you out of challenges. And I think that's like at this moment in time, in this world that we live in, it seems to be like the Kardashians are ruling the roost, Yeezy and Kardashians. It's like fucking mental, and you've got people like ourselves who are just absolute creative through and through. And, we're getting almost surpassed by a lot of this like influencer world that we live in, sadly.
A brand, something that comes to mind for me is I used to watch a lot of Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. And when he'd go into a restaurant, one of the biggest challenges was there was always pages and pages of stuff on the menu instead of being, here's what we are, here's what we're great at, here's what we stand for. And it feels like a lot of brands, not just within sportswear or football in particular, but in general, have gone down that multi-page menu route of try and please as many people as possible rather than actually standing for something.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's something where the brands that have continued to excel continued to be what they've always been about, or they, in the case of like On or Lululemon, when they first showed up, they had a very singular focus and a very singular point of view. And the other brands now are interchangeable. We talk about brand loyalty, but are brands doing enough to kind of enforce loyalty or to encourage loyalty? Because if they're changing face every 5 minutes, then what actually are you being loyal to? You're talking about logo loyalty rather than brand loyalty at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the root of what we're talking about is money, right? So at Nike, when I was creative director of football, and it ultimately became vice president of footwear, so across all of footwear, the pressure then was I heard and then became much more involved in the pressures of growing the business quarterly in revenue that would then go to the shareholders, which I understand. I'm a business person as well as a designer and a creative. I get that. But when you've got to grow a multi-billion-dollar business, hundreds of millions of dollars every quarter, then you're going to start to do things that aren't as pure. You're going to get into product categories that you might not be able to own. You're going to stretch businesses, dilute business. You're going to do all that stuff. And I think, Nike's growth back then, if you look at the growth, it was absolutely huge. And then they moved away from being a product brand to being a brand of marketing. And then they moved away from marketing to basically to be about retail, right? We'll go away from wholesale. We'll do our own retail. We'll save all the money that we're not going to give to our wholesalers to make our profits bigger, yada, yada, yada.
So we're about to wrap up. The one last thing I would like to ask all of you, and I'm sure you've been asked this loads of times before, so hopefully you've got pre-prepared answers. But, with all the industry experience that's collectively on this call, what would the you of today say to yourself at the start of your design career? Or if young you was starting out now, what would you of today say?
Yeah.
You have.
Oh, do you want to go? Okay. So
go for it.
Started my design career Winsford in Cheshire working for Dunlop Footwear in the summer of 1996. So I'd finished my degree, all guns are blazing, firing all cylinders, want to do some cool shit. Went to Dunlop, which is an old brand. It was an old brand back then, so God knows where it's at right now. It's probably like dead or in shoe shops. And
still make good tires.
Exactly. And I was like, you want to do cool creative stuff, and they were like, oh, we can't do that. So my advice is, as a creative, where you work, who you work with is everything. So my success came from working at a brand who believed in product and creativity and innovation and taking risks. And that was reinforced by the talent like Clancy and Craig, working with those guys. So get to a place where the people around you inspire you, elevate you, and work in a brand that at least some of the time is pushing to do cool shit. Otherwise, you will quickly lose your edge. You'll quickly become part of the furniture. So I would recommend that. And I'm not saying it's easy, because nothing's easy, but there are brands out there, and you might not get paid as much to go to this smaller brand who's got a vision, but I would go there first.
Yeah, I'd compliment what Peter said. I think the biggest, being a young designer, you feel like you have to make your mark on the world, and that mark in your mind, at least for me, was meant to be very individual. And one of the things, and particularly on this project too, that I learned, I want to say quickly, but I know it wasn't quickly, and Peter could probably attest to it. But it's very important.
Do you dream of being a designer just like Clancy Boyer, having the career he's had of putting things out on some of the most prestigious teams and football pitches around the world? Get over to sparkdesignacademy.com right now and sign up, where for a limited period only, you can join our kit design course for just £75. You can't even have a night out for that these days. Get over there now. Get your career on track today.
To listen, and just as Peter was talking about, like, who you surround yourself with, it's like, not only make that effort to surround yourself with good people, but then also listen to those people. And to, like, because first of all, like, and I've learned this, I've worked at Nike, I've worked at Procter, I've worked at Wieden & Kennedy, I've worked at some pretty big major brands and agencies. And the one thing that I always know to be the truth is that when I get there, I'm a very confident individual, like, and again, Peter and Craig can probably speak to this, but I honestly do believe that I've become a little more humble over the years. But when you go to these companies, one thing that you do notice is that these companies are full of smart and creative people. You're not the only smart and not the only creative person there. And so to tap into that, it's just amazing. Like, I'll just mention Procter one more time real quickly, only because, like, I was, like, just baffled with the amount of intelligence that I was surrounded with. And I was pretty well respected there. And I'm like, I'm an idiot compared to these people. And so, like, being able to judge yourself amongst your peers, amongst those people that you're working with, and to be able to listen, and hear what they have to say, because they're just as smart as you, if not smarter. And you're going to learn from that, and you're going to get better from that.
Really great points there. I think what I would say is similar. But I think as much as listening, I think it's really important to ask questions, and ask a lot of questions. And I think what tends to happen is when you're kind of fresh out of college and you are surrounded by a lot of these really intelligent, creative people, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. I mean, I remember the first time I went to Nike, I'm like, God, these are really cool people, and I'm like totally not cool,
True.
And you suddenly realize that they're really nice people who are just so eager to help you and to be inspired by what you bring to the table as well, So I think you've got to try and get over that really quickly, but you've just got to ask questions. Don't be frightened to ask your boss, well, what does that mean? Can you explain this to me? Because no one's kind of judging you. No one's expecting you to be Einstein when you've come out of college. They're expecting you to learn and grow with the companies, and you do that by asking lots and lots of questions. And I think the other thing that I would add to all of that is, I think where I've possibly become a little bit complacent is kind of what Peter was saying, was you get to a point where you're like, I'm going to chase the money. And I don't think you should. I think you should chase your value system. And if your value system is all about creativity, pushing through, being inspirational, all those sorts of things, I think you've got to try and stick to that as much as you possibly can, you know. And, you know, if you're good at what you do, don't worry about the cash. It'll come along.
I think, Craig,
And I think all too often,
yeah, I know. Don't apologise, Craig. I apologise. I think that's a really good point. There's 2 points in my career where I chased the money. Biggest mistake I ever made. Biggest mistake I ever made. One of them I was chasing. The other one was kind of like pushed on me. You know, like, you're going to get all this. No, because at the core of it, we're creatives. You know, and if you're loving what you do, you're going to create cool shit. You're going to get, the money's going to come.
Reality is as well, when you get offered a job, there's a reason that the money part of it is called compensation.
Exactly, Rob.
So, guys, thanks so much for your time today.
We need to mention a chap called Phil Dickinson, who we all had the pleasure to work with, and sadly passed away a short while ago. Phil was an inspiration to me. He was a piece of work. He was a complex dude. We could have a whole nother session talking about the moments and meetings where Phil would basically open his mouth and just blow everything up. But above all, it was one of the most passionate creators I've ever met in my life. And the one thing he said was, youth is here to push the establishment. So when you get into the job, your job is there to push the establishment. Just choose the right moment to do it. Don't be afraid that's when you're coming out of college, that's what you do. You push the establishment. Just be smart about when you do it. And I think today young people coming out of university are far more sophisticated than we ever were. Far more sophisticated. So I think they'll make the right choices. But yeah, they're here to shake it up when you come out of college. Just be smart about it when you do it. After you've listened, you know, after you've observed and different places, and you can do it easier than others. So I just wanted to mention Phil for us all. I know that he's in our hearts, and we find ourselves thinking of him occasionally. Sorry if that brings it down a bit.
I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Mr. Dickinson. You know, he'd give me my break at Nike, you know, and I mean, God, the amount of times, as you say, in meetings and stuff, he would just completely turn them on the head. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Yeah. But then in the same breath, you know, when work finished, he played just as hard. He was fantastic. Oh, yeah. I mean, what a character.
Yeah. As well, and then he almost broke me on a night out in LA.
Broke you. You got a line people. He'd break up teams of people, Rob. You don't need to be embarrassed about a one-on-one with Phil. No, needs to put a one on a rugby team with Phil, and then you kind of have a fighting chance. You know, there's a strange thing here as well. The Northern Power, Northern Soul at Nike was a big thing, right? I'm from Leeds. You know where you guys are from. Phil was from Leeds as well. Andy Kane, I think he's maybe still there. You know, isn't it funny that kind of there's something in the water up north in the approach to creativity and humility, and then just kind of voice. It's interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Well, guys, thanks so much for your insights today. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I know everybody that's going to have watched this will really appreciate it as well. Guys, I think all that's left to be said from Spark Design Academy, huge thank you to you. Huge thank you to everybody that's been watching at home. Stay tuned for more to come on the kit breakdown and with Spark Design Academy as well.
Absolutely. Good luck.